Okay. All right. I'm trying to admit people and record at the same time and doing all the things. All right. Welcome, everybody. We're excited today. This is a very special event and a special issue of our Georgia ESOL Professional Learning Series because we are welcoming two very, very special people here today. And we're talking about access, and we're talking about setting the new baseline for absolutely brand new access test this year. So please welcome Dr. Elizabeth Webb, who is a veteran Georgia public educator and a former Georgia ESOL president, who is serving as a director of English learner programs for the Cobb County, and who's passionate about providing effective student-centered language-rich Tier 1 instruction that engages all students in learning grade-level content. Dr. Jennifer Bendegras-Betterfield is our ESOL Title III coordinator for Floyd County schools in Northwest Georgia. She aligns ESOL services with structured literacy initiatives and helps develop strategic plans for dyslexia screening and literacy for emerging bilingual students. She's active in Georgia Teachers for English for Speakers of Other Languages and served as a president in 2021 and past presidents in 2022, 2023. Please welcome these two stellar, legendary presenters today. And without further ado, I'm stopping sharing my screen, and you're more than welcome to go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you. And thank you to Olga Moline, who is in Columbia County and who is a wonderful TESOL educator and leader in her own right, a presenter at WIDA, a presenter at Georgia TESOL, and just an incredible expert in all things that have to do with excellent instruction for English learners. So thank you to Olga for being our moderator today. All right. And it's an honor to present alongside Dr. Pendergrass-Benefield, who taught. I was the secretary when she was president, and I don't think I ever would have dared to be president if I hadn't seen somebody do such a good job as she did. So she's a tremendous leader in her own right and has a wonderful way of finding common ground among people with diverse opinions. That's fantastic. So Dr. Pendergrass-Benefield, do you want to lead us off on our topic today?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Webb. Dr. Webb is one of my heroes, so I'm excited to get to work with her on any project. But this one is particularly interesting because Dr. Webb leads one of the largest ESOL programs in the state, and I lead one of the smallest. We have 17 schools here, and collectively this year, our numbers are down. We have about 300 multilingual learners. We typically keep about 350, so a decline of 50 is significant when you're in a small district like this. But we're hoping to provide some perspective on how we're bracing for these new access scores in a big district and in a small district.
Exactly. And change is never easy. But we all were really so excited when we got the new WIDA English Language Development Standards Framework in 2020. It was really the first time we had new standards framework since 2006, because in 2012 the standards were simply amplified. They were not really updated. And then 6 more years it's taken to get an assessment. So this first assessment to actually be based on the 2020 WIDA ELD English Language Development Standards Framework is the 2026 access. So it feels like it came really fast, but it really came very slowly and over time. Here we go. This is me. So we want to ask everybody to think about your students. And if you're viewing the recording, which most everybody will be, because we have a very small audience here today, think about your students' experience with access testing in recent years and what it has been like in the past. It's not like it's been easy. 4 different domains. Takes a long time to get through all the domains. A lot of the kids, after they've taken it for several years, find it very arduous, very draining, We have a few kids in middle and high school who will, we have to go run down and catch them because they'd really rather not spend their day taking the access. Gotcha. No, you've got to come take the reading part today. But still, something that we've very new, very, very, very familiar, that we knew what it was like, and very familiar rhythm, and the students knew what to expect. So now this year, think about what happened. And Jennifer has been monitoring a little better than I have some of the reactions of ESOL educators around the country to the students with the new access. But here's some teacher concerns that have been mentioned on websites where ESOL teachers gather. 3 hours and 12 minutes for the access speaking test. What is your record? The new high school access is brutal. Yesterday during listening, a freshman asked me, will Mr. L teach us second semester? He had no idea about the academic vocabulary nor content or skills in the test, but only because he's a freshman, not because he doesn't have high native language speaking proficiency. Is it just me, or did the new WIDA kindergarten access way over our kindergartners' heads? So these are different samples, and you can read. I won't read any more to you. Unless, Jennifer, are there any more that are really worth highlighting here that I've skipped?
Not really. I will say this, the one there in the middle at the bottom, that is one that we heard here in our district too. Teachers giving that first grade reading test and being surprised at what students were expected to do on that test, especially in writing. And same for kindergarten, the kindergarten writing test. In January and February of kindergarten year, they were surprised at what they were expected to do, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very interesting to look at the experiences that people are reporting. And it, gives me, I have a little bit of PTSD, I have to admit, from the last time that we had a change in the access standards, because it was traumatic. It was very traumatic what happened last time. I mean, when I say traumatic, it's because there was just a dramatic decrease in impact on the students that very first year, a drastic drop in the number of kids who exited. Now, the Georgia DOE and WIDA have worked toward this very, very differently this year. And they said it's not going to be that way. It's a hold steady year, and they've taken steps in the background. But our educators are concerned because they've seen the kids struggle with a test that was already, as was pointed out in the chat, was already hard, was already very demanding, and they're seeing them struggle at a new level. And while the WIDA English Language Development Standards Framework was pushed out 6 years ago, all of the teachers who teach it are not just ESOL teachers, they're content teachers. And when you think about training every single content teacher who teaches an EL in a district to implement that framework alongside content with fidelity, the challenge cannot be overstated for that. So it's good that we now have a test that will give us results based and give us information back on how the students are performing on the new standards, because this is the first time we'll have that information. So again, why did it change? It's on the screen. WIDA released the new framework 2020. And so we've been having tests that reflected the 2012 WIDA standards for these past years, 2020, 2021, all the way through 2025. So now we do have a test that gives us the information on how our students are doing on the 2020 English Language Development Standards. So this is huge. You can't overstate how big this is, because the integration to the conceptual change was enormous. Assessment content was redesigned. This is per WIDA. They redesigned the assessment content. They updated the scoring and the interpretation, and they're updating related educator training and materials. Now, what they held steady was the processes for administering the access. So that, was held steady. And the items the feel and look of the items in terms of what you have to do. They tried to hold that steady as well. But the shift is just huge. Jennifer, do you want to talk more about that shift?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, I think they did a good job, WIDA and the DOE, of preparing us for those kinds of changes and noting that for teachers administrating that test, it might look pretty much the same, but for students, it was going to be a very different experience. I don't know that we were completely ready, and that's probably just on us, to handle the student stress when they saw how different it was. So I wonder if here in Floyd, if we prepared students enough. But
I honestly think that in order to prepare students better, we would have had to have spent much more time with items that were similar to what they were going to see on the test. And there was not as always, the educators always want more of those items than there are. That's been an ask in every district I've ever worked in, has been, we would like more practice items. We would like more practice items, and there never seemed to be enough. Also, just the changes, when you think about, okay, the big changes in the ELD framework. So social and instructional language, instead of being just standard number one, is standard number one and the foundation for every other standard, the language of English, language arts, math, science, and social studies. So social and instructional language was assessed across all of those envelopes in English, language arts, math, science, and social studies. Then the key language uses, the predominant key language uses. So the changes, again, in the assessment content are what drove that different student experience. And Jennifer, you always say, well, I don't know, we could have prepared them better. I just don't know how we could have prepared them better because of the way that the WIDA standards work. They work in tandem with the content standards. And if you think about a typical, say a typical first grader who has 45 minutes of service with an ESOL teacher once a day, and the rest of the time, the student is with the content teacher, and the content teacher has some understanding of what the WIDA framework has, but not an in-depth understanding. So now the question, I think, is going to be, how we continue to work with content teachers, because, as little time as we have with our students, 1 to 2 periods a day, typically for, K-8, and then perhaps more in high school, but perhaps not, depending on, you've got to figure out, how do we partner better with content teachers if we're going to get them more readier. I can't even speak English. If we're going to get our kids more prepared to handle the rigor of the items. But, we'll figure it out. Here again is, the key language uses. This is what 2020 did, huge shift to the key language uses of narrate, inform, explain, and argue. So recount went out the door. And remember, this is something important when you're talking about this test to folks in your district. Remind them that where these key language uses came from. WIDA did a huge study of content standards across the United States. And they identified from the content standards what the content standards were asking students to do with language in that content. And so they said in math, they are being asked to explain and argue, and to some extent inform. Those are the dominant things they have to do. And if you look in the Georgia standards for math, you'll see mathematical discourse and mathematical argumentation all over the place, because that's what they're expected. They're expected to learn math through communicating, not just communicate about math, but learn math through communicating. And WIDA reflected that type of usage of language, the way language was expected to be used in learning and acquiring the content in every single content area. So for language arts, you can see everything is very, very dominant, with explain a little less dominant. And in math, science, and social studies, very heavily oriented towards explaining and arguing. I think my theory is, and based on walk-in classrooms is that we're doing a pretty good job on informing and explaining, but we're not getting to arguing as much as we need. So trying to help teachers get to argumentation in all of the content areas is, I'm suspecting that that's what our data are going to tell us we're going to have to work harder on. The WIDA standards also added specific language features by content area, and we won't spend any time on this, but if you haven't looked at this lately, then this is a good spot to go back to in the grade level materials in the 2020 WIDA framework. And of course, I really encourage everybody to go and take advantage of the shorter versions. Back when we originally trained our teachers, we had all our teachers the full humongous, 449,000 page, document. It's so nice that you can now give them the document, the WIDA frameworks for their actual grade bands that they actually teach. The DOE's done magnificent work putting the WIDA associations in Georgia Suitcase with the content. So you can see here, go into Georgia Suitcase, and you can click in there and you can see the WIDA associations. And all of these associations were were identified and validated by experienced Georgia educators. So how do these things look in the new access? The tasks, the prompts, and the scoring targets, again, they reflect these new expectations. Writing, speaking, and listening, restructured. And what is it emphasizing? The key language use, the use within the key languages in the disciplinary context. So how are you arguing? How are you using argumentation in math? How are you explaining in the context of social studies? How are you narrating in the context of English language arts? All of these things. And of course, at least 2 language domains dominant in every single one. And then finally, underneath the surface, the construct of the task, was shifted to match the dated, big word here, conceptualizations of the language functions, the discourse features, and the language expectations. So there's a lot to unpack here in terms of what's going on. But the kids have got to be able to use language very specifically. And I think we're going to need to dig more deeply into those language functions, features, and the language expectations. And there's a couple of helpful links here to our Georgia standards, our WIDA associations. And then I don't know why I have the WIDA grades. Oh, the reason it says WIDA grades 6 through 8 ELD standards framework, I think it's from there you can get to all of the grade level standards framework. Sorry about that. So where are we? Well, really, the 2026 Access is a totally new test. The results the kids got this year are truly not comparable. They were not comparable to the results they got last year. So yet the DOE is giving us, it's calling this a hold steady year. I think we're all really eager to see how that turns out, because what we are hoping is that students last year who were scoring at a 4.1, if we're a district that exits at a 4.3 or a 4.4 for reclassification, if we're anxious to see that those students who are probably anticipating, oh, next year I can probably test out, we're hoping that they did. And that's the effort that's being made, is to hold the standards steady from last year to this year, and then set new standards based on the results. But again, the experience of the children that the students had this year was it's much more rigorous assessment. So there are going to be, again, it's a new baseline. It's new information. It's a new baseline. And we may see some kids that we thought, oh, and every year you see kids who we thought they were going to exit and they didn't quite exit. This year it will be interesting to see if there's more of that or if it's about the same as in other years. We hope it's just the same as in other years, and that we've been successful in holding everything steady in the background in spite of the fact that the test was such a different experience for the kids. But it's a transitional year. We will get new standards set this summer. And then next year, we'll have the second year of the test, the access test, this format, this reflection, this level of rigor, and the new standards, which will have been set based on how the students did this year. So that's where we are. And Jennifer, is this your slide or my slide? Is this still me?
This one is yours.
All right. So just finally finishing up, sorry here. I keep on thinking I'm about ready to turn it over to Jennifer. So your scale scores need to be interpreted differently. The range is unchanged, but the meaning of a score is different because of the standard shift. Different standards, different meaning. You can really not compare these scores to 2025 or any previous scores. 2016 to 2025 were the 2012 standards. This year, the proficiency levels remain the same as a transitional measure. Again, this is the DOE working with WIDA to hold this steady. The standard setting in July with the refined cut scores will be what's used in 2027. And again, we have new expectations for what language proficiency looks like. And we've been here once before and we've survived those waters and we will survive these again. But this is not important not to be knocked off your game when you see that this is different. This is the new baseline, the new starting point. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to use new and better standards to help our kids reach new and much more robust levels of proficiency in English.
Okay, so I'm going to talk with you a little bit about how Floyd County typically analyzes our access scores and how we're going to slightly adjust that this year. And before we dive into that conversation, this is not something that this group needs at all, but just as a reminder, we're going to talk about scale scores and proficiency level scores. So just a quick reminder of what those are intended for and what uses they have. Your scale scores are on a scale from 100 to 600, while your proficiency level scores, those PL scores, are 1 to 6, and they're domain specific, while scale scores account for question difficulty. So they're really intended to be comparing grade level to grade level or year to year. Just a couple of reminders there. WIDA's recommendations, and I saw a question in the chat box about whether these slides will be shared out, and I'm absolutely fine with that. If you are Dr. Webb and Olga doesn't mind sending those out. All of this information is linked. So if you're curious where this information about the scores from WIDA comes from, it'll be linked there in the slides. But WIDA has said about the scores we'll get this year that they will continue to publish score reports on the regular timeline. So glad for that. We can use scores for exit decisions. Also glad of that, because a year where we couldn't exit students who earn it would be so sad. So we're grateful for that. And then scale scores should be used only as a new baseline, and PL scores should be used with caution. So those are the only two types of scores, except for the composite scores and the literacy score, which uses the PL scores and the scale scores. So all of the scores that they're publishing either should be used as a baseline or to be used with caution. That is per WIDA. And then we did back in November in the assessment newsletter, we received this from the Office of Accountability, and it seems like, at least as of November, they intend to continue with comparing those scores for CCRPI purposes. Floyd County was concerned about that just because if WIDA is saying that scale scores and proficiency level scores should not be compared or should be used with caution at the very most lenient way that they put it, we wonder if that's using it with caution since CCRPI links to that promise list that no one wants to be on. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. And we did here in Floyd County reach out to the State Department, our assistant superintendent did, and just sort of passed on a one-pager of our concerns, which I'm sure they were grateful for, but we never heard anything back on that. And so now we're just dealing with whatever the Office of Accountability decides to do with it. So we're bracing here in Floyd County. I see this any anticipated changes for instruction. I see that in the chat box. So that's what we're going to talk about. What we're going to do here in Floyd County with these scores. Typically, we analyze these scores as a team, and we do value that CCRPI, that growth, the progress measure. And we also look at it for instructional concerns and what we can do as an instructional team moving forward. So just as a highlight for what we're looking at with CCRPI, one part of CCRPI, the progress part, is where we're most concerned right now. And so QR codes and links are throughout this slide. So when you get this, please feel free to explore the College and Career Readiness Performance Index for your building. But we're really concerned about this 10% of your schools or each of our schools progress report for English proficiency on those performance bands. And given a test that, if you'll remember that swimmer that Dr. Webb was showing in the beginning, a typical year he's swimming, it's hard work. You can see he's muscled. But then, like in the next picture, when we're talking about this year's test, students were reflecting that it was much more difficult. So we don't know what to expect from these scores, but from the student reports, from the teacher reports here in Floyd County, and from those that we've gathered in social media, it seems like there might be a hint that they may decrease. So if I'm a building administrator and I hear that my scores are probably going to decrease, not at the fault of any teacher or student in my building, but that my school will be held accountable for that with CCRPI, that's important news. And so we were sure to brace those administrators. They are all well aware. We talked about it in the principals meeting. We held ESOL meetings about it. Everyone is expecting these scores to be a take these with a grain of salt year because standard setting doesn't happen until summer. And so, as a building administrator, they're not new to having to give an administrative test that doesn't have standard setting yet. So, they're okay with it. They don't love that it's going to contribute to their CCRPI score. I'm not going to lie about that. But we did crunch some numbers here. And I just took our schools who this applies to. Because in a district this small, we do have some schools who won't have a subgroup, and this won't apply to them. So those administrators were initially very frustrated and then realized it didn't apply to them and then started checking their email. That's the sign of relief in a principal's meeting. But for those that do have a more diverse population, they were concerned. And I can see why. And you can see how when an ELA standard is reset, and they went ahead and just like let everyone who's testing an ELA take that penalty. That's different than when it only applies to your most diverse schools. So it's a different battle, and we have had to sort of work more closely with those administrators in our more diverse populations and schools with our most diverse populations. But I do want to talk just for a minute about that CCRPI impact in our buildings that already had some pretty good progress in the other areas, ELA and math. It made a difference of 1 to 2 points overall on the overall CCRPI score when we reduced the number of bands progressed by half, just for playing with the math. But we had two schools whose performance in progress on ELA and math was not already very high. And in those situations, reducing that just the 10% of the ESOL progress on access, it made a significant multiple point difference, took them into a new decade on that CCRPI score. So it is kind of a significant impact. And it's something that, as a district leader, I wanted to be sure that we're bracing our leadership for, that they know what's coming. Because when something happens like this, and you have guidance from WIDA that there may be an office at the DOE that accepts or doesn't accept that guidance, it can put some strain. And what you don't want is the strain to fall on the ESOL teacher's shoulders. Wow, why is our CCRPI score going down this many points because of access? What happened in your classroom? When really that is likely not the case. We're bracing ourselves for a different kind of situation here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this screen, but there are a couple of exceptions to that if you make one step. you get 1 point. But this will be included in that slideshow. And now we'll talk about how each of our districts are planning to use this going forward, knowing what we know.
So in Cobb, and I'm trying to think of what slides we've got coming up. I should have, we put our slideshow together, and I went to review it earlier today, and I didn't lost all the time that I had to do it. Like we are going to continue to do as WIDA has said, and as the DOE has said, we're going to exit kids as we have in the past. We use the 4.3 as our minimum score proficiency level for students to be eligible for reclassification as fluent English proficient. We're going to use that 4.3 to 4.9, and of course, the clear exit. We know it was harder for them to get there, so it makes sense to us that the 4.3 is definitely going to be, they're going to be they're going to be even better prepared this year than they would have been. Our concern is more that there may be some kids who come up just short that we really, we have not had a problem with kids who are getting a 4.3 in the past several years doing well without ESOL support in the regular classroom if our folks have taken them through the reclassification process and said, yes, they're ready to exit. So that has been a very good part of our process. So we're going to do that. And, as far as looking at the access scores, our plan right now, because we just don't know, we have set up so that as soon as the scores hit in DRC, we're pulling them into a spreadsheet, and we're gonna run a comparison between 2025 and 2026. So that we can just see, if numbers wise and percentage wise, we have fewer, like Jennifer, we have fewer ELs this year than I think we are in the 10,000 and something instead of the 11,000 and something. And we're going to see in terms of the percentage of ELs and just runs the comparisons that we can run. We are expecting some differences. We are hoping, our fingers are crossed that whatever the DOE and WIDA are doing in the background to do some, kind of like, to hold that steady, the expectation steady. We're hoping that this hold steady approach is going to work and it's going to be as similar as possible to last year. But again, we just don't know. And all that Dr. Pendergrass has said is, yes, the test was much harder. So that's what we're going to do, sort of like keep calm and carry on. But, kind of the combination of, trust but verify and keep calm and carry on. We're gonna be doing some verification. And Dr. Pendergrass Benefield?
Here in Floyd County, we are again very grateful for that reclassification zone where students can continue to exit if they score in that range. And here in Floyd County, that is our criteria. If they're at a 4.3, they're eligible for reclassification, so we're not making any changes there. When we're talking about score growth for CCRPI conversations, and one of the things that I do each year is I meet with each administrator and we have a talk about access scores, students who didn't make growth, plans for next year, that kind of thing. And at the end of this, when we share some resources with you, one of the things that I'm sharing is a slideshow that's already prepared with a way for you to show growth year to year. This may or may not be a great year to highlight your growth in a slideshow. We don't know, but we'll see what happens. But that is something that we typically do. This year, we will still have those conversations. We still want to talk about what the growth is, but with a solid understanding and with them having had months of preparation of, okay, I know what this is, but let's look at what the scores are and where can we go from here. For instructional planning purposes, what we typically do is any student who doesn't make the expected growth, then that student's information gets taken to an additional spreadsheet where we really focus, not just the administrators, but we meet one-on-one with those teachers. We talk about what happened this year, what could we tweak for next year, those kind of things. Those conversations are going to be a bit weaker this year because there's no way for us to know how much of the lack of progress is because of the test. we'll have some spaces where looking at like students is going to be helpful. If you have a student who's been in the country for about the same number of years as another student at the same grade level, and they did not make the progress that another student made, that's going to give us some information. And that's not something we typically dive into, but this year that's going to be especially important. In places like Armurchie, where between grades 6 and 12 we have 9 students, that's going to be harder to find. But in some of our bigger populations, one of our communities has a much larger EL population. And in that community, finding those like peers is going to be easier. So if you're in a situation where you can find like peers, this is a space where I'm so jealous of you for that, because I wish all of my teachers were going to have that this year. On the day that the scores drop, all of my ESOL teachers drop everything and we come to a central location. We reserve the media center and we do not share scores. So teachers are not talking about scores of a certain student with another, but we get these scores and we analyze them individually, but in a group. And we do that because it's important that that day as an ESOL teacher is the day. I have 2 teachers who wake up at 1 in the morning wondering if they can access their scores. Like, have you seen how they're doing? How's it going? It's a big deal, access drop day. And so we make it a big deal here. We're here to support each other, and you'll see things like celebration. And yes, I can't believe it. This is long-term EL, and they're finally going to exit. I can't believe it. They've made so much progress. And the high fives. And then you notice the quiet ones. And it's typically like afternoon that day before they finally say, I'm really let down by how this went. And we don't have whole group conversations about what we can change, but we're there for each other. And there's always chocolate. There's chocolate and there's togetherness. And I think this year more than ever, that's going to be important, finding some way to build community among teachers who are going through this stressful event because goodness, just preparing the district for this has been stressful. So I know they're feeling it too. But this is what we build on those days. Each person individually builds a map of those scores and what that looks like. The students they work with, they only put data in these for the students they work with. And then that's our togetherness activity. At the end of the year, when we do our one-on-ones, we talk one-on-one about, okay, let's open this back up. Let's look at the students who didn't make the progress we expected. Let's talk about that. And huge conversations come from there. There was one year, a couple years ago, where a high school who typically has pretty good growth, they really struggled. And their CCRPI score took a ding. And so when we met one-on-one, I said, let's look at those students. And when we opened that page, every one of those students was duly served in special education. And we talked about the scheduling issues and what that was causing and whether those students' language needs were being met. And that teacher having that data just sorted that way and being able to have those conversations was able to advocate for a different kind of service model and increase services for those students who are dually served. And the principal was highly motivated to do it because it affected his CCRPI score. So this spreadsheet, I'm going to share this with you. It's in the resources that are embedded in this slideshow. But I'm going to just highlight a couple of the tabs so that you know what this looks like. You have the full access report here. So it's taking just a second. There we go. Where you have student name, and then you have a comparison of the previous year's listening and this year's listening, and then speaking, reading, writing, and their overall. Now I'll say this. If you're in Northwest Georgia RESA, they've developed a beautiful data dashboard. And they actually worked with me on this spreadsheet and made sure that everything that we look at is in there and more, and it's beautiful. But when you open it up, all the data is already there, and you don't learn from it that way. So here we still, even though we access that beautiful data from the dashboard, we still build it out ourselves because these are the students we work with. So I know that makes me old school. We talk about progress, whether there was no movement, some movement, an entire band, or more than a band. And then when you scroll down to the bottom, this spreadsheet automatically, if you tally the students who did each level of progress, it makes you a pie chart here that you can copy and paste into the slideshow that is also in that resource. These are going to be used with a grain of salt this year. We're still going to use this full tab, but looking so closely at the band growth and at the students who did not make at least one band of progress, and were they also flagged for reading critical, and was all of those things. We're going to do them, but we're going to let the data and the additional information help guide us in how to weight this in our decision making for next year. And I also, this very last tab, let me show you just quickly about why we use that. So the reading part of Access, if you have a student who's struggling in that part, remember that reading on Access is only reading comprehension, but there's more to reading than that. And if you have a student who's struggling in literacy and they're struggling with comprehension, well, WIDA is very equipped. In fact, their resources could not be more beautiful for helping you with students who need to reach better comprehension. If it is something that's a specific word reading, like a phonics, an alphabetic principle, something like that, something smaller than a word, keep in mind that WIDA is not going to be where you're able to find those resources. But no matter where your reading difficulty is, this purple box highlights what shows up on those access scores. So if you have a student whose access reading score is not progressing, it might be time to look at exactly where. And if you do choose to do that in this data collection instrument, the very last tab is the sheet that we use to collect literacy information on smaller than a word, vowel, consonant, E. Are they proficient with longer words? That kind of thing. We reflect and we make plans and we support each other and we celebrate. You're welcome to scan this QR code, or you're also going to get this slideshow, so it's not necessary, but this will give you just all of the things that we use here in Floyd County. This first one is that data spreadsheet collection of worksheets. And then here's the slideshow for presenting your pie chart to pie chart last year to this year. And just links to CCRPI guidance as well. That's it.
Thanks. Way to go, Jennifer. Well, Jennifer is so old school and wonderful. I envy her the chocolate, and I envy her, working through the data, in that group, in that community. On Access Drop Day in Floyd County, our amazing partner in accountability is up at 2 a.m. She checks the access scores. She has all the queries ready to run. She hits the button and she starts to analyze the scores. We're going to be doing the same in the ESOL programs office, and we're going to do a comparison. We're going to do some communication out to let everybody know, what are we seeing? How's it looking? And then, schools obviously can, as you've already alluded to, schools can see the data in DRC, if they want to get up at 1 and 2 in the morning, or as soon as, I think it hit at 2 last year. That they can see the data and start to look at it. But by last year, very quickly, we have the detailed spreadsheets, very similar to what Jennifer has done, but we go ahead and populate it for our schools. We do have schools that have 19 ELs, but we also have schools that have, 600 ELs. So it's just one of those things that we do for our folks. If you are in a larger district and you would like some information about how we do this, please reach out to me, elizabeth.webb@cobbk12.org. We'd be glad to talk about that. I did do a presentation with Leslie Epperson from the Accountability Office in Cobb at Georgia ESOL in Athens 2 years ago, and we shared kind of our secrets, and we're still glad to share those. But we can see everything for the kids' progress for all the years on overall access that they have been with us. We can see their proficiency, their progress by domain. They're color coded to see who made clear exit, who is eligible for reclassification. They get their pre-populated reclassification forms if a kid qualifies. We pre-populate their reclassification forms with their scores and their names and all the information at the top, and then they fill out the forms when they have the meeting. So we do a lot to try to make the process lighter. That said, this year, looking at those scores and having time to process through those scores and pull people together and talk about the scores is going to be something that, we're going to have to figure out and process through too. And that is not something that we have had a structure for. So I'm very jealous of Jennifer and her amazing structure of just bringing everybody together. I wish I could literally have a structure where I could bring all my ESOL teachers from 110 schools together to do that.
I was about to say, how many teachers would that be? Do you have a media center?
Well, it's upward of 300, and it would be tough. It would be tough, but we do try to make sure that everybody knows we're there and that we're partners with them in helping them make sense of the data. So that's what it will be like in Cobb. It will be a little less chocolate and a little less together time, but hopefully they will get the information and support they need to make those decisions. And, the main thing I think that we really have got to communicate to our teachers and to our administrators and our kids is that this is a new baseline year. So if they are a little disappointed in where they landed on their proficiency level and they didn't quite to get to the level that they needed to be considered for exit in their district this year, and they were really hoping to make it to that this year, those are the kids who are probably going to be need the most cheering up, if that happens, maybe it won't, but if it happens, and, so I think we need to anticipate students' needs. And the final thing I'll share with you guys is that we've been doing something very exciting. And Olga, I'm going to share with you a couple of our forms. I just didn't get to it before today, but we've been doing student goal setting the past several years. And we were inspired by the SGP, the student growth percentile data that the DOE was sharing in the fall with low, typical, and high growth, and knowing that if a kid was stuck in low growth or typical growth, even typical growth, without ever getting to high growth, they were quite likely to become a long-term EL. And long-term ELs are associated with not achieving academically in good comparison with their native English-speaking peers. So we've been working on student goal setting. And last year, we exited 998 students who had been in long-term EL status. We're really excited about that. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on how we're doing on our goal setting. We have moved our goal setting from the fall to the spring, so they're going to get their goal setting forms. So we are going to engage the kids in talking about their scores, and if they were disappointed, in looking at them and saying, okay, this is where I did on the new baseline, and this is how I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do better next year. So really taking and empowering the kids. We want to empower the teachers. We want to help them move through this new baseline, but we also want to empower the kids and help them. So, two different districts, different contexts, different strengths, but we learn from each other. Jennifer Pendergrass Benefield is just one of my heroes in the whole state for her innovative thinking and fearless leadership. I just love her style and what she makes happen. And we're over in Cobb County. We just are glad to be in a state that has passionate leaders like her and that we can learn from. So, yeah, but that's our little take on it from our little corner of the world. And we started about 10 minutes late. So even though it's 5, I would be willing to stay a few more minutes if Jennifer can for maybe a few questions, if anybody has any, or we can just end right on time if you guys want to.
I can do that if Olga can.
Olga, can
Absolutely,
you?
yes. I was just wondering. Yes, we were supposed to start at 4:15, and it's still not even 5, so we still have some time. If everybody can do that, let's open it to the questions, I guess.
Wow, you know what, Olga? This whole time I was thinking that you're supposed to start at 4.
I was too.
You're both just like, Olga.
Don't invite us to speak on time.
Don't invite us to speak again because we don't know what we're doing. You should never.
Yes, I was not late.
We were early.
I was still a little early, even with all the hiccups. I was still a little bit early, but well, thank you. Look, it's always such a pleasure to listen to you and to use all the resources that you guys are sharing. Dr. Pendergrass Benefield shared those resources earlier in one of the conferences, I believe, and I really enjoyed it. Changed my Access review game completely. That spreadsheet that you shared, it was a completely different experience for me. So I do appreciate that, and I'm so glad that everybody will get a chance to use that as well. All right, so I think we had a couple of questions in the chat, but I believe all of them have been answered and addressed already. So do we have any more questions? Oh, thank you for appreciating Georgia ESOL. We appreciate you.
Yeah, Georgia ESOL is so wonderful. And there's a big spring symposium coming up in Savannah in just a couple of weeks, right? So folks who can get down there for that, that'll be wonderful.
So let me go ahead and share just a few things while people are coming up with more questions, right? So yes, so speaking about the Spring Symposium, which we are excited to announce that it will be happening on May 15th in Savannah, Georgia. The registration, I believe, is still open. Please, please, please do consider attending this wonderful event. It's a one-day event, and it's a Friday. So we still have the whole weekend to enjoy in Savannah if you choose to do so. But before that, on Friday, you will experience a lineup of amazing, informative, inspiring sessions that have been handpicked and tailored for all of you guys. Please visit our website. This year, we will have a lot of new things coming up for you, a lot of opportunities. You will learn about some of them during the symposium in Savannah, but we'll also be posting more things on the website. Okay. Now, as far as our professional learning series goes, this is the tentative schedule for the year. We might have a few more sessions coming up, but as of right now, this is the stellar lineup that we have. I'm really proud and excited about it this year. We have a couple of special issues that present the topics that will step a little bit outside of the teaching experiences, and we'll have some, just some special taste to them. But every single topic is something that I would never miss. I know for sure, and I'm hoping that you guys will appreciate that as well. Yes, the drop date for Access is April 27th, if I'm not mistaken. That is the date. That is a Monday. I already have a plan to wake up at 5, at least, if not at 4, that day, and we'll go check my computer first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm. So M has asked, so should we expect for our scores to be slightly lower? M, it's hard to say. This test was much more difficult for students, which is causing concern. But again, the DOE and WIDA are calling this a whole study year. And I do know there is work that they have done in the background to try to compare last year's test to this year's test and do some crosswalking so that the proficiency levels, what it took to get a 4.3 last year should be the same this year. It's just hard to know how that works when the tests are so different and the standards are so different. But let's say that the aim is for that to happen. But again, Dr. Pendergrass Benefield pointed out beautifully, it's not completely consistent. The messaging across is not completely consistent from what's being shared with WIDA and what's being shared at the state level. There's probably differences because of the state specific context. And also because of the way that the Georgia CCRPI works. So they're doing. I know they're trying to make the right decisions and keep everything as much the same as possible. So, we cannot tell you with 100% certainty, expect your scores to be lower. But what we're saying is that in both of our districts, we are sharing the message that it's a new baseline. The scores are not, WIDA is telling us the scores are not comparable. And we are, if we see that students we expected to easily attain proficiency and be considered for exit or attain a clear exit don't this year, then, again, it's a completely new test, completely new experience for the students. And I don't know that even no matter how good they are, I don't know if the DOE can completely account for the fact that the test was such a new experience for students. So no, that's not a very satisfactory answer, but it's the best answer I've got right now, is that it is a new baseline, and yet we've got to kind of keep calm and carry on and eat lots of chocolate.
Don't forget the chocolate.
Don't forget the chocolate.
I see this question about the baseline scores. And I think what we're trying to say is that WIDA is saying that these scores that we are about to receive on April 27th should be considered a new baseline because we're not comparing them to previous years, according to WIDA. So I think that is why WIDA is referring to those as baseline scores. So I hope that, oh, you said just explained, and never mind. Dr. Webb already did it, so I just saw that. Double explained, and you're welcome.
We've got each other's back. Totally. So what I would say to everybody is Georgia TESOL is the place to be after your access scores drop. So you need to reach out to your friends at Georgia TESOL. We'll all be comparing. We'll all be talking to one another. We've even chatted about, if anybody would like to have, our spreadsheet that we are going to use to pull in the 2025 and 2026 so we can compare, our average scores and things like that, we'd be glad to share that. And like I said, I alluded to that earlier. So just be a part of this community and being together and sharing and talking this through and making meaning out of it, because it's a new experience. And the stronger we are understanding this and working through this together and sharing our insights that we get, I get insights from so many colleagues in Georgia TESOL that are so valuable. And so I just encourage you all to just turn to this group. And, if you're feeling at all bewildered or need some support, turn to this group, and you will find that there will be people here in your Georgia TESOL, fellow Georgia TESOL members and community members who will want to collaborate with you. Who knows, we may be even having some discussion forums after this.
I love that idea. I think it's a wonderful idea. We really do need to discuss all the new changes. And Chrissy, I do agree with you. I'm staying optimistic too. I'm also thinking about the rating and the scoring of the test. As a test rater in the past, I know that scoring criteria, rating criteria also change, right? With the drop of the new test, and hopefully that will balance things out a little bit. But that's just me being optimistic, of course.
Yeah,
all the things that we're hoping for.
We just have to cross our fingers. Angela O'Brien, is it Scheit?
It's just how you think it is. Yeah, it's German.
German.
Ja.
Ich war eigentlich einmal ein Deutschlehrerin.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes. Have any instructional tools or strategies stood out recently when looking at the context of the new access test? I'll just tell you that we've been working on student discourse and on really elevating student voice and getting students engaged. We're doing classroom walks, and we're looking for evidence of students using language to narrate, inform, explain, and argue. We're trying to elevate people's awareness of the key language uses. We're trying to take them back to their content standards and show them where in the content standards it says, hey, students need to use the academic language of math. They need to be making arguments and explanations expectations. So we are trying to do that. So that's where we are in Cobb is with a real strong focus on student discourse, oral and written, but particularly oral, and on really hammering home those key language, the importance of engaging them and practicing those key language uses with the content standards. That seems to be a little more straightforward path to getting the content teachers engaged than to try to get the content teachers to look at the WIDA language expectations, which is probably a hard sell. What about you, Dr. Pendergrass-Benefield? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, we are not yet to the place of looking at any sort of changes to the instruction that we're already giving. We have had an increased focus on talking about the standards in our ESOL team meetings and PL. So and that is so valuable because there's so much there. I heard someone say that these have teeth, and they do. They definitely have more teeth than before. I feel like before they were just statements, but there are actual goals that students need to meet here. And if you're looking at those standards and you realize, oh, I'm always teaching this, but I'm never really getting to that, that reflection time is so important. That's really as far as we've gotten here.
But Angela, one thing, just again, getting teachers to move towards centering student discourse. We were helped out a lot in K-5 by the Georgia literacy modules last year, but I think a lot of folks did the Georgia literacy models and taking time to connect those two. Like we had Georgia literacy models implementation last year and all of the learning in our first year of a 2-hour literacy block in K-5. Then this year we had new materials, instructional materials, which a lot of districts did for the new standards. And I think we've got to crosswalk the learning from the literacy modules, which a lot of it was really valuable and related to oral language development because they recognize that oral language is the foundation of literacy. And connecting that to how you're implementing your new instructional materials, and then so that's a beginning answer. It's going to be a multi-year journey. It's going to be a multi-year journey, not just because it's not just the change in access, but it's also the change in the English language arts standards and everything else. There's a whole, and the literacy practices. In 10 years, we're going to have prepared kids so beautifully and for being successful. And now we're in that transition time where we're increasing the effectiveness of our practices and learning so much. But the change is not comfortable, and that's why it's important to be a part of the community while you're going through the changes. Yeah, Christy Hernandez, just to convince content teachers to utilize them. Yes, and yes, good points. Pointing out how the DOE is shown where the WIDA associations are for the content teachers. And then again, we're working on convincing content teachers to utilize the instructional activities, high leverage instructional practices that will get students speaking using the key language uses. Other people are taking different, getting the language the paradigm to shift towards centering student language. Is where we are. And again, everybody's doing this in their own way that works for their district. I think there's no more questions.
Lovely. Okay, that was a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for that. It is so important to listen to your thoughts as we're all trying to process all these changes and things that are coming. And well, definitely it's yet another reason to visit our symposium on May 15th, right? right after the test scores drop. And speaking of which, before that, we meet another time, and look at that, this is coming. We're talking about dually exceptional students next time, and that will be May 1st. That will be a Friday at 4:30. So a little bit different time, but not too different. So these two wonderful ladies are going to talk to us about dual exceptionality, universal design for learning, and strategies for special education. So please consider registering and attending. I will be sending out this information very soon. Thank you, everybody, so much. The resources that we discussed, we will share them. I'll make sure that they're sent to all of you. And then, yeah.
And Olga, I can personally tell you that these two educators are top drawer. I mean, I think they teach in a Georgia school district somewhere. Pretty good little Georgia school district somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are.